Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey. And on this show, we like to explore self-improvement, physical fitness and health, mental health, and we're always looking for new ways that we can help heal ourselves and recover whatever it may be from. Sometimes it's trauma, sometimes it's PTSD, sometimes it's a physical setback, a financial setback, and we're always looking at new ways of healing. And today's episode is actually, as I was just telling our guests here, this is something I had never heard of. I'm super excited to explore it together, all of us today, to get into some of the science behind it, the history of it, the practice of it, and most importantly, the benefits of it, which we're going to be talking about it in the implication and application of healing, trauma and PTSD and working through emotions. And it's very interesting. I'm not even going to introduce what it is. I'll have our guest, you really, the expert, tell us all about it. But Ms. Amy Vince, so great to have you here. And could you please introduce yourself for us?
Of course. First of all, thank you for having me on. I'm honored to be here. I am an EFT tapping coach and the founder of the Soar With Tapping app. I am a mom of a 11-year-old daughter and a
Mm.
wife, and overall, a kind of a seeker. I've always kind of been interested in human behavior. I find it fascinating, and I sought different ways of trying to understand people. But when I came across tapping, that it was something that kind of sparked my interest a lot more immediately. So while I'm like an NLP practitioner and a massage therapist and all these other things, this was the thing that truly caught my attention. I've been certified for about 17 years and I'm still really passionate about it.
For sure. And yeah, you mentioned psychology, and we're definitely going to get into that. I want to start very, very simple question, which is what does EFT stand for in EFT tapping?
EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique.
Alrighty. And do you know about like how it ended up being named? Like, how did you discover EFT tapping yourself?
I discovered it. I was at a Tony Robbins event where
Oh,
I
okay.
had I had gone through his whole program. I love Tony. He's amazing, so heart-centered. Um, I'd gone through his whole program and then I was crewing at an event, and one of the other crew members got in contact with me about a month after the event and said, I found this amazing tool. I really want to try it with you. So we had one session and I was hooked immediately. I didn't really know anything about why it worked. I just knew that I instantly felt better and wanted to pursue it myself. So, very shortly after that, I sought out my own tapping coach and became certified in tapping, and kind of the rest is history.
Yeah, and I know just from my limited research that I did, it can be used for some of the things I mentioned earlier in the episode. Phobias, trauma, stress, anxiety, addictions, obviously
Literally anything.
emotions,
Yeah,
right? And so what I have to
literally
ask is,
anything.
what were you using it for? What were you working through with tapping?
Well, I just had a lot of issues. I
Right,
had, there's like most people, there was childhood trauma. And from that trauma, it created fears and kind of limiting beliefs about who I was. But as I mentioned, I was always really curious about my own behavior and why I, for example, got irrationally upset when I received criticism, or why I got breast cancer as opposed to somebody else who is, for
right.
the most part, biologically the same as me. Why did I get it and not them,
Yeah,
sort of thing. So
yeah.
I was always really curious about these things. And I wanted to unravel those things about myself. And tapping
Mm,
kind of started the process. It wasn't the only thing that gave me those answers, but it really started the process of me being able to heal some things that I didn't like about who I was and that I felt really insecure about, and I wanted to change. So it was kind of a series of events that led me to it. But more than anything, I've always been a seeker and I always wanted to try and improve myself and heal the
Right.
parts of me that needed healing. What I more than anything wanted was to change myself. It didn't quite turn
Mm.
out that way, but EFT helped me to heal those parts of myself. And you did ask about the history of it. So I forgot to answer that part of the question. So
Yeah,
if you
no,
don't
no, you're
mind, I'd
good.
like to go back and kind of, because it's a really interesting history.
Yeah.
Um, so there was a psychologist back in the 90s, I believe, that was working with a woman that had a severe phobia of water. Couldn't really even
Hmm.
splash it on her face without feeling extreme fear and anxiety around it.
Wow.
So
Okay.
he was working with her for a period of time and having really little success, little to no success with her. But at the time, he was also studying kind of energy, Chinese medicine, energy meridians. And happened to ask her in a session, where is it that you feel this fear in your body? She said, I feel it in my stomach. So he had her tap on the energy meridian that aligns with her stomach and just talk about her phobia of water. So she did that, and within a very short period of time, had, one of the 1 minute miracles that we often hear about with tools like this,
Yeah.
and said, I'm cured. And she ran over to the pool and started splashing water in her face, and all of a sudden she was free of her phobia of water. So of course the psychologist was very interested in that combination of talking about her fear and tapping on her energy meridians. So he developed something called thought field therapy. And it was rather complicated because it meant tapping on the perfect energy meridian and dealing with
Right.
exactly the corresponding fear or issue that they were experiencing. So it was a little bit complicated. So one of his students, Gary Craig, further developed it into EFT, emotional freedom technique. And he kind of, for a better word, standardized where you tap
Mm.
because you end up tapping on all of your energy meridians while you're talking about what it is you want to release or what it is that feel like you need to heal. And that combination has turned into tapping today. It's a we've it's streamlined a lot more since those beginning
Yeah,
phases.
yeah.
A lot, even EFT involved like tapping on different fingers and, doing all kinds of different things. And now it's a little bit more streamlined where we just tap on a karate chop point and then we go through all of the 14 energy meridians and tap on each of those, talking about what it is we'd like to heal.
For sure. I remember well, when I was researching, it was described kind of as a kind of like psychological acupuncture, because you're talking about those points that you're tapping. And what I think is interesting, what I've learned through hosting this show, I've had some previous guests who've come on and talk about specifically storing tension or PTSD in a certain part of their body. I think
Hmm.
that's really interesting because, like the one guest we had, it was in his throat. He really like tightened his throat and really like had a stiff neck. For other people, it might be lower back. Some people, it's
Yep.
their left shoulder. Like, it's very interesting how our body stores our PTSD or stress or whatever it may be. It's different emotional energies. And even, it's not too unrealistic to believe because I remember I used to go to this place to get custom running shoes made, and they would have all the people getting shoes stand on these pressure plates that will show you like a 3D map of how you're standing. And we were all standing right next to each other, the same level floor, right the same way. But
Hmm.
like someone's left heel would be completely flared up and red based on how much pressure they were putting, and the rest of their feet not. And then you had some people who, their right big toe, they were storing all their pressure. So just looking at how people were displacing pressure and their body weight onto their feet, everyone kind of has the flow of energy through their body different. So I find it
I
so
know.
amazing how we can be kind of like you said earlier, how we can be almost biologically exactly the same as someone else, but our body can function completely differently or have these
Yeah.
things happen that are just completely different. I think it's really amazing.
I know. It's so fascinating to me too. I love trying to unravel it and see why that is. Why is it that, somebody is storing all the tension in their neck from a past experience or something along those lines? It's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a subconscious thing, really. Even just like
Hmm.
people will say, hey, like let your tongue relax and take it down from the roof of your mouth, and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize I was keeping it up there. Or a lot of times people are like
Yeah.
subconsciously like clenching their jaw or grinding their teeth or just even holding their shoulders so
Yeah.
tense and they don't realize it. So
Yeah.
I wondered the reason behind if I could ask my brain like, why did you put all my tension in my left shoulder or wherever it is, it'd be like, what would my brain say? It'd be like, I just picked one,
I
or would
know,
it
right?
say some elaborate answer that just like shocks me? I'm curious, but
Yeah.
I did want to go over, you mentioned the word meridian tapping at specific
Hmm. Hmm.
meridian points on the body. For those of us who aren't familiar, what does that mean and kind of where are those?
So in Chinese medicine, there are 14 different energy meridians, and they kind of cover our entire body. But there's a set on our right side and a set on our left side. They're symmetrical. And they govern different parts of our body. Like the fear energy meridian goes down. Like people often have um, tension in their shoulder blades.
Right,
That's the fear and resentment energy meridian. So that'll go down and it goes through your kidneys, down to your bladder, down to your knees. So if you have knee problems, bladder problems, kidney problems, upper shoulder problems, that's how our
right. I'm
Chinese
tracking.
energy meridians kind of line up. So each one is assigned kind of different emotions and different organs. And in acupuncture, they use needles to kind of, well, let me back up. When you have a problem, when you have a fear, even a physical pain, a limiting belief of any kind, there is an energy blockage of some kind along your energy meridians. And so in Chinese medicine, they use a needle to help dissipate that blockage in the energy and help your
Mm,
energy to flow again. Because when our
okay.
energy is flowing, we are in a state of health. It's very easy for our body to heal
Right.
itself. That's what it was designed to do. So, but when we have an energy blockage, we are blocking our body's own ability to heal. So energy meridian has a needle in it. It'll help dissipate that energy and allow it to flow. And in tapping, we use the percussion of tapping on acupressure points or points where the energy meridians kind of surface up or surface to a place where we can reach them, like on our chin or on our under our nose or something along those lines. Where they would normally put a needle, that's where we can tap. And that is what allows the energy to flow again. The thing that makes tapping so powerful is that it also utilizes a cognitive therapy aspect. So you are actively talking about what it is you want to release. And then it also incorporates a somatic therapy element because when you are tapping on your body, you can't help but gather your energy from the past and gather your energy from the worrying about the future and bring it to this present moment. And that is where you will find the most peaceful and calm feelings is in this present moment. So
Mm.
it's kind of a triple threat of all three of those elements, which is why it's like acupuncture on steroids. It makes things it neutralizes emotions, it neutralizes fears, any lingering effects from PTSD. It will neutralize those things very fast and effectively. So something that would take maybe a couple of years to release in traditional therapy could be released in a matter of weeks or even months using tapping.
And the best part is, if you're someone who hasn't done acupuncture because you're afraid, quote, of needles, this has no needles involved, right? It's just
Right,
tapping with
no
our
pain
fingers.
involved whatsoever. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are using our fingers to tap, or are you tapping us, or are we tapping ourselves? How does it work when you're doing EFT tapping?
I assume all practitioners are a little bit different, but I do all of my sessions over Zoom. So I'm tapping on my body while my
Mhm.
client is tapping on their body, and they're just repeating after me. So we have an initial session where I ask a lot of questions. I find out, what their goals are and, do a little digging to find out why they have whatever fears or limiting beliefs that are getting in their way. And then I come up with a script on the fly and help them release whatever it is they need to release.
Okay, so it's like a guided practice.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Alrighty. And the best part about it is pretty much anyone can do it, right? There's nothing that restricts someone from doing EFT tapping.
Absolutely not. It can be done anywhere, anytime, and it is free. I mean, you might need a little bit of help figuring out exactly how to do it and what to say and kind of uncovering the reasons why. But it is literally available to anybody at any time. And I encourage everybody to do some research and get to know this tool because it is extremely powerful. And I wouldn't, if you indulge me, I'd like to explain what's happening on a scientific level
Yeah, for
because,
sure.
we're talking about a lot of woo-woo stuff. I want to make sure that your
Yeah,
listeners
yeah,
know that there is a really solid base of scientific evidence here that this
for
works.
sure.
So when we are in a stressed state, of any kind, say we're feeling anxious or depressed, or we have a physical pain in our body, most of the time it triggers the stress center in our brain, the amygdala. And our amygdala goes into fight or flight mode. It releases a flood of cortisol into our bodies, and we're just feeling anxious or stressed. A lot of the time, we don't even know why this has happened. We're just feeling the effects of it. So, what tapping does is when we're tapping on our energy meridians, we're telling our amygdala to de escalate that triggering response, de escalate that fight or flight mode, de escalate, de escalate, de escalate. And what that's
Okay.
doing, it is lowering cortisol in our body. Studies have shown it lowers it 43% faster than if you did nothing else.
Okay.
It's lowering our heart rate, lowering our blood pressure, increasing our immune system response and increasing our level of peace and calm and happiness overall. There have been over 300 studies that have shown the efficacy of this tool and how fast it can actually be.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think what I find interesting too is like people don't realize how physically your body is affected by stress. Just a couple episodes back, I released a Mother's Day episode, and one of the things I discussed was how stress affects pregnancy and like the mother and a child during pregnancy. And
Oh,
you
sure.
wouldn't
Yeah.
believe all the different things that can manifest and happen because of stress. Um, and
Hmm.
people, it doesn't have to be an extreme scale. Moderate stress repeatedly every day or hour and hour can build up. And even if you're not a pregnant woman, just anyone in general, the physical ailments that can result from stress, especially long-term extreme stress,
Yeah.
if you haven't looked into those, it'll blow your mind how many things are the result of stress. And so anything we can do to de-stress, like you said, is good. And one of the things too is so many people, as we've discussed on the show a lot, especially in regard to the military or to the younger generations, is that that attraction to negative de-stressors, to smoking, to drinking, to things that quote de-stress them mentally, not physically,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because there's a lot of bad effects that come with it, but
Yeah.
mentally they believe that they're de-stressing by smoking or drinking, and then they're not. Whereas you've got good de-stressors like this, like yoga, meditation, or other hobbies that are not
Yeah.
only lowering your stress, but they're overall positive for your body in ways outside of the mental clearing. You have the physical benefits of it, and like you just said, lowering the cortisol levels and having that physical
Hmm.
benefit, which even if it doesn't boost anything in your body, lowering things that will harm your body, that's a benefit.
It's interesting how stress, in at least in our country today, can almost be viewed as like a badge of honor. Like I am so busy and I am so
Right.
in demand that I have this stress, and it can be seen as a really
Mm.
positive thing in some ways. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. The effects of stress, doctors agree that 95% of ailments happen because of an overload of stress.
Yeah.
And I just, I know that tapping doesn't, and a lot of things out there kind of manage stress. They'll manage our response to it. But what I love about tapping is that it, if we use it on the root cause of whatever is causing the stress. So, for example, say that somebody is really struggling with procrastination. They just can't move forward on something, even
Yeah.
if it's been a lifelong goal. They can't do the exercise that they want to do, or they can't, finish the project that they're
Mm.
working on,
So
whatever
a
it
lot
is.
of
They
people you're speaking
can't,
to right now.
yeah, they can't figure out why they're getting in their own way with this.
Yeah.
I guarantee that there is something underneath that that is making them feel like it is unsafe to move forward in some way. It doesn't have to be rational at all, and most of the time
Mm.
it isn't.
Yeah.
But if we can use tapping on the root cause, which is often something like, I'm not worthy and deserving of success,
Mm.
or I'm afraid of people judging and criticizing me, or something along those lines. If we use the tool on those things, then the symptom of procrastination can disappear. And we don't
Right.
have to manage procrastination anymore. We don't have to coach ourselves through those feelings. If we neutralize the emotions and the fear underneath it, then we can get rid of procrastination altogether, which is
Right.
what's really appealing to me. If we're working on anxiety, for example, the root cause of anxiety is fear. And we don't often recognize it as that because we don't often register the triggers that are affecting us.
Yeah.
So we just all of a sudden feel anxiety. But if we go back and, like, for example, write down our top 10 fears, and we work diligently through those top 10 fears, we're not just managing anxiety, which tapping can be used as a band-aid on that also if you need it in a really critical moment. But if we use it on the root cause of those things, what if we can actually get rid of anxiety and free our bodies and our minds from those really fearful thoughts? I mean, that to me is the most powerful part of this tool.
Right, and a lot of the discussions I've had on the show are about how a lot of mainstream medications are focused on symptom treatment, not root cause
Yes.
destruction, whereas EFT, you're saying, can do both, but specifically it can do that root cause destruction, which is the best part because then it gets rid of all the symptoms. And I like what you
Yeah.
said about the badge of honor. I think a lot of young people, especially entrepreneurs, CEOs, military people compete. They have a competition of who slept the least amount of hours. I'm running
Right.
on 4 hours of sleep. I'm running on, or who can drink more energy drinks. I'm on my third energy drink of the day. Like it really
Right.
is a competition. It seems like sometimes, and yeah, there's so much stress for no reason, and it's kind of like you're looked down on if you have no stress, if you're living a peaceful life. They're like, well, you're lazy or you're not doing anything or you're not successful. And it's like you
Yeah.
can have you're more successful if you can have peace and get done everything you want to get done. But people who don't have that look at it as, hey, if you're not stressed, you're not doing it right. And I love it. It's actually,
Right.
no, I'm
Right.
not stressed because I know how to do it right, So that's definitely something um, interesting. I'm glad you went into the science behind it because I know a lot of people when they hear EFT tapping and meridian points, it can seem
Yeah.
very, as you said, woo woo. But as I've done stuff on the show like reflexology and other non-traditional in the mainstream media sense, but gone into like ancient Chinese culture and healing and
Hmm.
that stuff, there's so much stuff that, the Chinese have been doing for hundreds or thousands of years that people, a lot of people have put to the side, but it's like the same energy points that we've talked about in this episode and some other points I've also talked about in some scientific healing episodes for laser acupuncture for addiction treatment using red light, and
Absolutely.
other episodes that utilize phototherapy and light to trigger a response in cells. It's been at the same point as the acupuncture points because
Yep.
scientifically they were recognized as producing the most energy. So it's like everything that people have been doing it's only getting more and more scientifically proven. So I think it's interesting that, most people, if they can dismiss something up front as, woo-woo and not actually look into the science of it, it just makes, quote, their lives easier or themselves feel better. But I think it's important for everyone to always do the research and like look into it because
Yeah.
it may
Yeah.
sound strange, but there's a reason people do these things,
Yeah.
and maybe
Chinese,
it's not your personal preference, but your personal preference and does it actually work are two very different things.
right. I mean, the Chinese culture has a long history of Chinese energy. I mean, they've been around for hundreds of years. And I like thinking of it in terms of us being intellectual, emotional, physical, and spiritual beings. We're all four of those things. But um, Americans in particular are a little behind the game on our awareness of our emotions. Like we've
Yeah,
consistently maybe set them aside as unimportant or masked them with happy thoughts, denying them, even judging and criticizing them at times.
yeah,
But the truth is, it is a really vital part of who we are. And there is an emotional element to all of the things that we've mentioned, including physical pain. Like you said, if there is a trauma, PTSD, or something along those lines, or a physical trauma like a sexual assault or something like that,
yeah,
it's not unusual for a woman to have problems in her uterus after she has had some kind of a sexual assault. So we tend to hold on to those emotions. And
mm,
really, what EFT does is it allows all of the emotions underneath these events to leave our body instead of storing them in those organs or in different places in our muscles. It allows them to leave our body and then allows us to heal ourselves. So, for example, I'll I'll use myself as an example. I had horrible back pain for over 20 years. I never
wow,
knew what caused it. There was no injury or anything along those lines. I mean, I have thrown my back out, but it was doing things like taking laundry out of the dryer, really innocuous things, not anything like a football injury. But when I kind of dug deeper within myself and within the energy meridians and discovered that there was a part of me that was really afraid of being vulnerable, like showing people that I had a softer side, showing people that there was a part of me that wasn't perfect or okay.
yeah,
And all I had to do was tap on that for about 2 hours. And literally, I have not had back pain since then. That was 7 or 8 years ago. I haven't had one little twinge of back pain since then. And all it took was honoring and acknowledging those fears and feelings. I didn't change anything in 2 hours other than my perception about what I could and couldn't do. And so I didn't get rid of that vulnerable part of myself that I didn't like. All I did was come into acceptance and get
mm,
rid of my resistance around it. So honoring and acknowledging those emotions and giving them their day in court was a thing that allowed me to heal my body. So emotions have a really important role in our overall health.
Yeah.
Just like exercise is an important thing to do, and eating right is an important thing to do, and continuing to stimulate your mind is an important thing to do. None of those are discounted in any way, but we just need to add the emotional part into the mix.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with eating and exercise, you can push it off, but the symptoms are more visible, tangible, and a hindrance, right? If you don't eat for a certain amount of days, you're gonna end up eating, or if you're not eating healthy, you're gonna feel it. If you're not working out, you're gonna feel it. With the emotional symptoms and damage, it can be more subtle or more easy or easier to push aside. So I think, like you said, a lot of
Yeah.
people push their emotions aside. They say, "Hey, I need to focus and I need to work on this," or "I don't want to deal with that." But like I've had Vietnam veterans on the show who 50,
Hmm.
60 years later, it all came, erupting out after bottling them up for over, decades. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
the moral of the story is that like you can only push aside for so long. Like it is inevitable that there's going to be long-term damage or in other short-term effects from that emotional push aside. I think it's just easier for
Yeah.
people to do compared to neglecting their physical health with the exercise and dieting because, or even just eating in general. Like because they
Yeah.
feel it physically, but with the emotional, it can take a while to manifest as physical symptoms. What
Yeah.
I want to ask, I am curious because one of my closest friends is known as the breathing goddess, and she does a lot of breath work and
Oh, I
facilitating
love
breath
breath
work.
work.
I
Yeah.
was going to ask,
Hmm.
what is the breathing like during EFT tapping? Is it kind of structured or guided breathing along with all of this?
Nope. Nope. No focus on breathing whatsoever. Just on feeling.
Okay.
Feeling. Yeah.
And so, in order to feel more, you just have that natural breath. So your focus is on the feeling and the tapping points. And
Yes. Yes.
kind of, you said it's been kind of standardized for everyone, but like, do people, based on their personal situations, require a different order of tapping or a different amount of, obviously, I think you're gonna say it's different amount of sessions or time based on,
Hmm.
it's not always a one and done, as you said, a 1 minute miracle. It's not always going to be like that. Some people
Right.
have more deeply rooted traumas or issues. So, like, how does
Hmm.
it look like for someone going through EFT tapping?
So you are absolutely right. It's different for every person. Some things are easier to neutralize than others. Uh, for example, big T traumas
Mm,
like wartime PTSD or an assault of some kind or big car accident or even like a cancer diagnosis or something like that is relatively easy to neutralize. And you wouldn't think so,
mm,
but because it is a really huge event that has a huge impact. But what's easy about it is that it's usually like one or two events that you can go through kind of frame by frame and neutralize all of
mm,
the emotions associated with it. Because there's going to be many points along the timeline of that event where there is regret or shame or guilt or something along those lines that needs to be neutralized. And so we take the event start to finish and neutralize all the points along that timeline. And a big event, like a sexual trauma, I have neutralized with my clients in 2 sessions, sometimes one session, depending on how elaborate it was. So big T traumas, fairly easy to neutralize.
mm.
Little T traumas
Years and
are
years.
can be
Right.
really complex, and it's often not even identified as trauma by the people that experienced it. For
Yeah.
example, if they
Yeah.
had an angry parent or if they were ignored a lot as a child, those create fears and then they create limiting beliefs about themselves that have decades worth of evidence to support it. So those can be a little bit harder, a lot harder to dislodge sometimes
Right. I get what you're
because they're
saying.
very complex. They have a lot of different fingers that reach out into every area of their life, and it kind of needs to be neutralized along the way. So, for example, I have a client that has experienced many complex traumas and big T traumas, including her mother getting murdered, an alcoholic father, and controlling stepmother, and all of these things.
Right.
But with she had a psychotic break, and within a year, she was really functioning well in her life. And so it may take like weekly sessions for a year for something like that, but that could be, a decade or more in traditional, if you're just doing traditional talk therapy.
Right.
Um, so they all have kind of their different timeline, but I have had a phobia of flying gone in one 90-minute session. And I've had bigger issues like back pain gone in one session. It just depends. It depends on the person. It depends
Right.
on their kind of emotional awareness of themselves to be able to identify and even talk about what they're feeling. Can be really hard for some people if they've never kind of
Right. Right.
worked on strengthening that part of themselves, like flexing that muscle. Then it'll take a little bit more time to just kind of get that awareness and be able to allow themselves to feel at all, because a lot of people just intuitively cut that off as an unsafe type of feeling. If it's not
Yeah.
happiness or like a shiny happy emotion, we haven't often allowed ourselves to engage with it, and it's the actual act of engaging with it and feeling it that allows us to release it. So different clients and different scenarios and different timing, but overall, a lot less time than just doing traditional talk therapy or anything by
Right.
itself. I always also encourage a really comprehensive approach to healing. If somebody comes to me and they're depressed, I want them to see a nutritionist and I want them to start working out with a trainer and doing this emotional work and
Right.
seeking out some kind of spiritual help. That is going to be a really fast path towards your recovery if you do all of those things and make recovery your full-time job.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really interesting, like you said, but when you look at a lot of those deeply rooted little T traumas, like I like what you said, like a lot of us don't recognize them as traumas or as things that affected us subconsciously later on in life, especially with the parent-child relationships, the
Yeah.
parent-on-parent relationship that they had between one another. But we've had a lot of episodes on my show covering that subject in specific, so I definitely agree with it. And I think
Hmm.
what I want to know is the order of tapping always the same, or do you tap in different orders for different kind of effects, or how does the tapping sequence itself kind of work?
Okay. So if you want to address the root cause of any issue, my number one thing is to have clients write down their top 10 fears and address that first. Because, like we talked about, if you have procrastination or addiction or anxiety or depression, any one of those things can all be traced back to one of those, what I call foundational fears. That's what's underneath all of it. How it manifests is less important than the fear itself that's causing it. So I always encourage people to start with those big foundational fears. Then from there, we go to, well, let me back up. You have to start with the trauma. You have to neutralize the trauma first. I don't have something that addresses specific trauma on my app because I think that trauma needs to be addressed with a trained professional
Okay.
using tapping. There's no way I could genericize tapping scripts specifically for trauma
Right.
on the app because it is so individual and it needs to be handled really sensitively. So
Well,
I
let's take a
encourage,
step back and actually, I know you've mentioned your app a little bit. Tell us
yeah.
about the app and how that
Oh,
differs from working one-on-one with you and like the whole purpose of the app.
so when I started doing tapping full time, I just have such a passion for it. I really
Right.
felt like I needed to reach more people. I needed to tell more people about this. More people need to know that this tool is available to them. So that's why I started kind of researching creating an app.
Right.
And at the time, what I saw that was available out there really lacked the ability to take EFT tapping and use it to its full potential. And
Okay.
what I mean by that is really addressing those root causes in a deep and meaningful way. So what I saw out there often placed a band-aid over whatever it is you're dealing with, which is necessary, like we talked about. It's necessary sometimes to just have a band-aid to be able to get through your day. But if you really want to address those things at the root cause, I saw that that was a big hole that needed to be
Right.
filled. And so I created the app and designed it with a lot of videos talking and educating people about how to get to the root cause of these issues and how to work through things like addiction or depression or anxiety. Because if you go to a tapping app that has hundreds of tapping scripts, you're not going to know where to start. You
Right.
just, I mean, how do you know what's the best thing to choose if I'm struggling with depression? I have no clue. So I really wanted to give people an education about how to do this well, how to do it in a way that's going to be most effective for you. So I encourage everybody to start there. And that's why I created the app because I wanted people to understand their emotions. So we start with the top 10 foundational fears. Really work on those because if we neutralize those in the beginning, then it kind of takes care of a lot of the other things that you're struggling with. So if you neutralize anxiety, for example, maybe you don't need to self-soothe as much with food or alcohol or drugs or something along those lines. Maybe you don't feel the need to soothe that part of yourself that's feeling really anxious if you get rid of the fear. So there is definitely an order in which things are released the fastest, and by going to the root cause, that's the way to do it. So you start with the root cause, then you go to the limiting beliefs that were created around it, like the belief that maybe I'm stupid or um, I'm not, um, gosh, I'm drawing a blank, but you get the idea.
Right.
Like, I'm not supposed to feel this way, or I'm not supposed to act this way. Um, so it kind of goes from there.
So is the app meant to be something we use in partnership with you, or is this for us to do EFT tapping on our own at any time, anywhere? Um,
Like I said, I always encourage people with a big T trauma, especially, to seek out a trained professional, and I'm happy to help
right.
people with that. For everything else, and I encourage people to use the app because they will start to get a real strong and fast education on their emotions, on what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and they can, well, all of the tapping scripts are genericized to cover a lot of different circumstances within a certain column. It does give enough of a framework that people can understand like the reasons behind their behavior and behind their feelings and help to start release them without really knowing anything about psychology or human behavior. They can just go in and it is kind of pre-scripted for them to help them
Mm.
start to get that education.
So you would suggest getting with you or another EFT tapping professional first and then using the app after that point, after kind of establishing that how to and that base knowledge with someone who has been trained like yourself to perform it and to guide others.
Yes, I think working on the trauma is a really important step. It doesn't necessarily have to be the first step.
Right.
I mean, because if you're struggling to sleep, then I think using a tapping script right away to help you be able to sleep through the night is going to be really important because it's really hard to function if you haven't gotten
Right,
enough
right.
sleep. So there are certain things that, skip the line and go straight to
Mm,
that in particular. Or if you're experiencing physical pain, skip the line and go to the app and then, deal with addressing that pain specifically and then try and understand the root causes or the trauma behind it. But yeah, definitely.
right.
Both
So,
are valuable in their own way.
yeah, like you said, it's going to depend person to person, situation to situation. And so if you're unsure where to start, maybe if you're unsure to start at EFT tapping right away or to do the trauma causation right away, then they could always get with someone like yourself or another professional to kind of determine what's the best course of action and where to go from there to make up that
Yes,
plan.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, you can't lose with working on your very specific issues with a trained tapping professional, because it will be so specific to you and it will
Right.
use your language. And so it'll be easier to kind of dislodge whatever it is your feelings are. But the app is always a good supplement to working with a tapping coach. Or if you wanted to start on your own, like I said, the app is a great place to start too.
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna have Amy's website in the description below for this episode, which also has some links to the app and some information on the app, as well as Amy's story in more detail, a blog, and then again, to get in contact with her if you want to work with her one-on-one or learn more about tapping. But again, that app and the website are going to be in the description below for y'all to check out. And Ms. Amy, I just want to thank you for coming on the show today and sharing something that, like I said, I had never heard of it. I've learned a
Mhm.
lot. I'm definitely curious and going to look into it more. And I highly encourage everyone to look into it, especially those of all who maybe you've tried therapy or you've tried other healing techniques and you just haven't found success. This is just something else for you to try and have
Mhm.
success. And one thing I want to say that I kind of forgot earlier on was I think that EFT tapping is also only as effective as you allow it to be. So if you go into this with a resisting mindset, because the whole point is about accepting and healing. If you go into this saying this is fake or this is stupid or having that resisting mindset, you're really only hurting yourself from tapping in tapping. It was a play on words there by accident. That was by accident. But from tapping into tapping, you're really hurting yourself there. Don't limit yourself to, or don't limit yourself or tapping. Go into it with an open mind and, allow it to do what it's supposed to do what you're supposed to do, and you'll find a lot better healing. And I'm sure you agree with that.
I couldn't agree more. I think that it, when I first started tapping, it felt silly. I felt like I looked silly doing
Right,
it.
right.
Um, but it was really the most cathartic thing I've ever gone through. I mean, I've had all of those thoughts swirling in my head forever, but to say them out loud really did something magical in my body and my heart, and which is why I've made it my career. But I do want to offer your listeners a little gift. If they go to my website, soarwithtapping.com /podcast dash special, they can find a code that if they put it into the app, they will get 50% off their first annual subscription.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming on the show today and sharing all of your knowledge and your journey. I hope a lot of people find healing through this. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, maybe if it's not for you, it may be a tool that helps someone you know. So please share this with someone who may need to try this and may need to look into this. But Ms. Amy, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide. Through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side. As one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.